Katrina, your role represents probably the biggest change, and coming into that, how did that feel? Does it feel different now versus the first time you took the stage?
I don't really know how to answer that question. When you have to do a show every night, you have to
Mhm.
keep it, you have to trick yourself into forgetting what happens every time. You can't know the end when you start. So it's kind of this like you're doing research over and over and over again, or like you're doing an archaeology dig and you're at, you're going to dig in that hole and you're going to stop in 2.5 hours, but you don't really know what you're going to find in there. So, yes, of course, it feels different. I'm a different person than I was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, than when we opened. So but I don't know how to tell you exactly in what ways it feels different because
It's
it's just
okay.
constant research and like excavation of who Bobby is and what is she doing.
In a way, because it was so different, was it freeing that it had not been played by a woman before, or was it more pressure?
There's so much pressure everywhere for everything.
Yeah.
So,
So different pressure.
I mean, what was so great about how we approached it in the room with Marianne too was that it felt like it was a new work. So there wasn't a lot of comparison and with previous productions, or I mean, sometimes we look at the original script to see what the intent was of a line that felt sort of outdated, but was it just mostly just felt like, oh, we're doing a new piece, and so much like glorious table work and discussion about what's happening in the scenes, and background with the characters and their relationships, and so it just felt like just working on a new thing, and it didn't matter what had happened before.
That's really amazing because I don't think that's always the case with revivals, to think of it as a new work. And there's so much as we began this conversation, conversations and opinions about how you revive. Do you
It
revive?
depends on your director.
Yes.
It depends on your director how a revival is approached.
Katrina, because she never leaves the stage. I think she leaves
Right.
the stage for about 1 second. But that's the same in the rehearsal room. She was rehearsing with me all day, every day. And other actors would come in for their scenes, and Katrina was still there, and then they'd go out, and Katrina would still be there. And a lot of the time we'd be improvising, okay, what is the relationship with this boyfriend? And what's the history? And how do you know this couple? And how long do you know them? And who's the friend? And every day we would try something different. And Katrina was just always in the moment. I mean, completely in the moment. She would just change every day, just like a kind of chameleon, every single second, every single rehearsal. She's always open. So I can understand why you're saying what you say, Katrina, because every night she's completely new and fresh. It's extraordinary.
Because as an audience member, you come in and thinking, "Oh, I've seen this before." No, I haven't. It does feel like a new work. I think that's really important what you just excavated there, and as Patty says, it's all about the director and how the director, what space the director makes for that.
I, two things going back to Marianne's comment before about how wonderful Steve was when they had a passionate disagreement. Marianne was no different. You were just as generous if we had passionate ideas. And that takes a very secure director to be so open to your creative vision. And I thank you for that. It was an absolute joy. And regarding Katrina, all of our scene work as couples was done separately. And fun fact, when we finally got together and ran pieces of the show, I'll speak for myself, I got terribly jealous of her friendships with all the other people. I said, but I'm her friend. You have friends? I was so upset. She's my best friend.
That's amazing. With so much, we were talking earlier about women and how you've empowered women in this show. And with so much at stake for women right now in this country, what do you hope, each of you, that audiences will take away from this?
Well, I think that it's that Bobby's in control of her own life. No one knows what wish she's making at the end, but it's her decision to make and no one else's. So I hope that women would feel empowered that, maybe you don't have to get married and settle down if you don't want to. The world is open to us to do whatever we want to do with our own lives.
Mm.
Hopefully it'll stay that way.
Anybody else?
I don't know. I don't know. I was going to say the same thing. Just that there can be a realistic shift in dynamics and power play. And, you know, I think so many people are used to this show. Nikki and I have talked about, we share a dressing room, so we have lots of conversations. We've talked about how this is not the show of the fainting, fawning women that it originally was. You know, I'm not fainting. She's, you know, still kicking Seaver's butt every day. She's not the one who's like, oh my God, I've never been high. This is so, like, we are, am I allowed to say badasses?
Say it.
Like, we are badass women taking charge of our lives. And I wish it could be that way all across the board.
I don't know how much a piece of theater can change the politics of our country. I really don't. And I know that this particular piece does empower women, but how does that go forward?
Vote, vote.
Well, exactly. I mean, there's only so much we can do, and then the rest is up to the women who feel empowered. And right now, we're fucked. We are fucked.
We've now said badass and fuck, so I know my staff is very happy.
Check
But
the gate, check the gate.
Let's just keep going.
What else is there to say?
I know.
We're fucked.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, it is, but if women see this show and they walk out of here having been bullied at work or something and they feel empowered by this show and they go back and they say no, and there's a shift.
I think what is interesting, Katrina, you're going to say something, but is that I thought when I did this show first, that it was obvious that 35-year-old women feel a pressure to either settle down or have kids or both, and that might then compromise their lives possibly, because then they might be in service to somebody else. I thought that was obvious. But what's been quite interesting is I don't think that is obvious. I think it's obvious to women and it's obvious to some men, but I don't think it's obvious to lots of people, because I have heard people say, is that a real thing? And you go, yes, it is a real thing. What you mean is because we're not talking about it. So let's talk about it. Yes, it's a real thing when you're 35 and you haven't settled down, or you have a career, or you've chosen to have a career before you settle down. It becomes a real pressure.
Still.
Absolutely
I think, no, I still, because I mean, I was 41 when I got married and I had people calling me saying, I feel so bad for you. I was like, I don't have a disease. You know, I'm living a great life.
I got married at 34, and a relative who was excited about our nuptials came up to me at a barbecue and over the tater salad said, so 1 year, you have 1 year and then you have to have a baby.
Wow.
And I was just smiled, and I was angry. I thought, what an abrasive thing to say to someone. And I don't have children, and that was our choice. And,
Well-
but I'm a great aunt, and I
Yes.
love my cats. Thank you.
I heard that, but you know, it's an interesting thing too, because if you're not a parent, people assume you couldn't be a parent and that you don't like children. These are all because we're supposed to be married and have children.
I knew from the time I was a little girl, I wanted to be Aunt Jenny from the Brady Bunch. Like I knew I'd be a great aunt. I knew it. So
It makes
hey.
me laugh because as you were saying that, I realized my mom Sylvia came to see, I would reference my mother a lot in rehearsals. She came to see the show over Thanksgiving. And this is the longest stretch of time that she has not asked me when I'm having kids. It's never happening. She's not accepting that, but it's not happening. But this is the longest stretch of time that she's not commented on it. It's since she saw the show.
And do you think it's because she finally sees what you're doing?
Jesus.
On that note, I want to go back to Katrina, because you were going to say something. We all.
It's just the I got this really lovely letter from a young woman who really she felt like she identified with what was going on with Bobby because she was struggling with the taking the risk of being vulnerable enough to be loved, to receive love by from someone, and also even farther than that to experience her own love for herself. So I feel like that's pretty impactful. Is if you don't see yourself or ask yourself, what do I want? How can you truly be of service in the world? If you're really only just like everyone else, everyone else, everyone else, if you don't claim some space in your own person, how can you move forward and change the world? You know, so I think it seems a tiny thing, but it's actually, I think it can be a big
I
thing.
think it's a big thing. I think it's a big thing. And it's why it's so important that we reflect things on stage that people can see themselves in.
Well, what do you think? What do you think, Heather, is going to happen in our theater going forward, considering what is happening in our country? What do you think will be produced because we need to educate an audience as opposed to make money for the producer? What do you think will happen? Right? Yeah. No, but seriously, what gets produced?
What gets produced is always an issue, but there are brave people like Marianne that get producers to support her. And there are works like this work. There's, works like Strange Loop. And, Michael R. Jackson won our Jonathan Larson Award a number of years ago.
That is an incredible, what's the word I'm looking for? A pool of talent for musicals. I was a judge for one season and I could not believe the amount of talent that'll never see the light of day. It's because of the politics of Broadway.
But
Go ahead.
Shayna Taub, also a Larson recipient. So the goal here is for everybody should be, running to the door to find out who our Larson recipients are, because there are people like Patti LuPone sitting on the panel saying this person has an interesting voice. And the year you sat on that panel, we told this young composer, he was in the security line going through the airport, and we said, you won the Jonathan Larson grant. And we went through the panel, and Patti LuPone was on the panel, and he went, and he got thrown out of the security line.
But there's so much talent out there. There's so much talent with so many present, what's the word I'm looking for? Pop, I don't know what I'm saying. Things to say that would educate an audience, that would elevate an audience, which would teach an audience. And will it get on? I mean, the Jonathan Larson grant is a phenomenal event for young composers and lyricists and playwrights. And I just wish that our producers, that especially Disney and Universal, levy a tax on them, create a black box, put those shows on. Put those shows on, because we need an educated, elevated audience.
We also,
We do.
amen to that. We also need to be talking about facts, because I hear people say, oh, these plays don't sell. These plays don't sell. Not true, not true, not true. And, we know things that they say that they do put a lot of investment don't sell. So it's like, well, you're going to put that on, but you're not going to take a risk on this young composer who has an original idea, and we underestimate audiences.
That's right. Always underestimate the audience. We always underestimate.
Audiences want to be told a story. Audiences
smarter
want
than
to
you
see
think they.
themselves. And so, we are, going to get this industry kicking and screaming into the 20th century. Oh, are we in the 21st?
No, but can I just add though, because London is a few weeks ahead in terms of the pandemic, because we were fucked before you were. And what is amazing in London right now is that people are going to the theatre in their droves. I mean, people are hungry. And what's extraordinary as well is that the English audiences are being quite vocal. They're more like an American audience. They're very receptive. I've just done a show in the West End, and I couldn't believe how receptive every night the audience is. They really want to be there. And then, you know, like tonight I went to see For Cuddler Girls over the road. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's
Another
amazing.
one, another revival.
And people are loving it, loving it. That's a political piece, and that's on Broadway.
And the audiences are loving it. So again, I think I'm not sure what facts we're always dealing with when people are saying, "Oh, we're not going to do this because this isn't going to sell." Because you see, audiences going to see these. I'm sorry, go.
No, I'm just glad you weren't here tonight because I forgot one of the notes you did. And I was nervous. That's all. So I'll do it
She's
tomorrow.
like,
I'll do it
"Shoot."
tomorrow. I did like 3 out of the 4. Okay.
But I do think one of the things we can do is champion young writers
Yep.
in every way that we can. You know, the American Theater Wing's doing it. Patty, you do it in many different ways. It's so important to our the vitality of theater. And if theater is not relevant to the time we're living in, then we're not going to be relevant
Well,
at some
if, you know,
point.
if we're going to go backwards in our government decisions, then theater needs to go forward. They're not going to stop us. I mean, where else is that going to happen? But in theater, in entertainment, that we progress as opposed to, regress with the rest of the country.
Well, theater is the one place where we come from all different places, arrive in the same place, sit in the same place, and take the same journey together. It's the last place that happens, and it's a place that can change hearts and minds. I do believe that. If you talk about Angels in America, and you think about where we were and where we are, although obviously we're all nervous about where we might be going back to, but and that I believe that work and many others helped change the narrative about that and helped change hearts and minds. It's a place where we can still have a dialogue. So I do think there are things that we can do. It is discouraging, to be in this time. It is discouraging to still hear the stories that we all experienced of the pressure to get married and to have children. I still sit in rooms and hear, well, I was the biggest supporter of women, but then they get pregnant. It's like, what? And the only way, and I think this requires all of us to change the thinking,
They can't get pregnant.
is
They can't. We carry children. We birth children. What the fuck? What did you say? and then she got pregnant? Yes, I think so.
yes, those things still
Goddesses!
hear us roar. We're not taking this. Those things still get said. That's why this work and what you've done to empower this, to maybe change some hearts and minds, is really important. So do you hope this inspires, and you've kind of answered this question, some more expansive gender casting, some more revivals that approach this as new work?
On company?
On
Anything.
on revivals in general, on new work in general?
I mean, I think the most important thing about the theatre is the writing. But I also think that theatre should speak to an audience about now. So yes, therefore, it's political with a small p or a capital P. But you have to be careful, I suppose, because the one can, outweigh the other. So you could easily do something that you think is relevant to now that treads all over the writer's work, but actually the writer's work is the most paramount thing in the theatre, because for me it's all about the words. But that might be just because I've been trained in sort of classic theatre. But if you can find a brilliant piece, a really well-written piece will lend itself to all sorts of different personalities, all sorts of different interpretations. So I would never have wanted to take Company or Sondheim or George Firth's work and put something on top of it that was about what I wanted to say. It's all about trying to tease from the text something that I think is relevant to now. That's the craft. That's the craft of what I do. So as long as you're honoring the writer's work, then yes, absolutely, you can find all sorts of different ways. I mean, look at what happens to Shakespeare. And I think that, the company can be done again in different ways, more gender switches, all sorts of things could happen with the company and it could stay integrally the same. And then ultimately, the most radical thing will be to put it back into a male hands and set it in 1970. And people will go, wow, that's just so relevant to now.